don't know if you guys remember that Central Park 5. Well, one of these guys ran for a council member seat in New York City this past election and he won. Let's get into the video. But I was trying to figure out what was this case all about again. So I had to do my little research and present it to you guys. But before we get into the video, let's hit the like bell and subscribe to the channel. Now, here we go. The case was about 5 black teenagers who were wrongfully accused of R-ing a white woman in Central Park back in 1989. After the men had served 6 to 13 years in prison, the case was thrown out in 2002. One of the men who served said, "We carry the scars that nobody sees." His name is Richardson. When they were convicted of this crime, they were teenagers. By the time they got out of prison, they were grown men. They were let out due to DNA testing, and a serial rapist confessed to the crime. After they had served 6 to 13 years in prison, the city ultimately agreed in a legal settlement that these men were innocent and exonerated the men and agreed to pay the combination of $41 million to these 5 men. The young group was coerced into confessing to a crime they didn't commit. Demonized by the press and imprisoned, it took 12 years for the true culprit, Matthias Reyes, to confess. Wise was the oldest among the Central Park 5. At the time he was arrested, he was 16 years old. And when he was exonerated and was let out in 2002, he had spent approximately 14 years behind bars. He was the only one among the 5 to serve his full sentence in an adult prison system. Can you imagine a 16-year-old in an adult prison system? The many scars that comes with that, not only physical, but mental. Yusef Salam was 16 years old. Antron McCrae, another one who was 16 years old. Kersey Wise was 18. Kevin Richardson was 16. And Raymond Santana was 15 years old. They were only released after Matthias Reyes, a convicted murderer and serial rapist in prison, confessed to the crime. The case of the Central Park 5 changed the way juveniles in New York City are treated when they get arrested. It requires cops to videotape juvenile interrogations. This ensures that cops do not falsely extract confessions from juveniles. The law was signed December 13, 2020 by Andrew Cuomo. None of the DNA testing from the Central Park 5 was consistent with the DNA from the crime scene. And yet, all of the boys, all of these 5 teenagers were wrongfully convicted and served 6 to 13 years in prison for the attack. This was made possible by coerced confessions. One of the boys confessed after he was beaten by police. Kersey Wise and Yusef Salam were the only 2 members of the Central Park 5 to be friends before the accused crime. The rest did not know each other. The young woman who was R'd, the R word, it happened on April the 19th, 1989. The 28-year-old woman, Trisha Milley, was R'd and viciously attacked while jogging in New York City's Central Park. She spent 12 days in a coma following the attack and was so severely disfigured by the attack that a friend was able to identify her only by her ring. After she came out of the coma 12 days later, she could not remember the attack. That part of her memory was erased. And I say it was the grace of God. Can you imagine her remembering that attack for the rest of her life? Her left eye socket was fractured in 21 places. She had severe brain damage, internal bleeding, severe hemorrhagic shock, severe hypothermia, 75 to 80% loss of blood amongst many injuries this young woman suffered, but she was not able to identify the culprits because she couldn't remember anything. And therefore, these 5 boys went to prison for a very long time for a crime they did not commit. The teenagers were tried as adults under the New York law of that time, and they were convicted despite inconsistent and inaccurate confessions. DNA did not put them at the scene. DNA excluded them, and there were no eyewitnesses, no witnesses to account that they were there. However, many years later, Reyes, the man who finally confessed to the crime, his DNA was linked to forensic evidence that was collected during the investigation. But it was a little too late for these teenagers who had served so many years in prison and wore the scars mentally, and I would imagine physically as well. So it was June of 2002 when Mateus Reyes confessed to the crime and the group was exonerated, only because Reyes' DNA matched the DNA at the crime scene. The semen found at the crime scene also did not match any of the young men. Also, the confessions of these young men were very inconsistent with each other, but that did not stop the DA from going after them and convicting them. All 5 of the teenagers confessed to the crime after long interrogations, 14 to 30 hours. But each of them later on recanted their statements. But by then it was a little too late. They said they were coerced by police officers. So they served between 5 and 13 years in prison. A lot of people want to know, where are the Central Park 5 currently and what are they doing? Kevin Richardson, who is now 45 years old, was just 14 years old when he became a suspect in the Central Park jogger case. Today, he lives in New Jersey with his wife and 2 daughters. He works as an advocate for the criminal justice reform system and continues to speak about his experience at various events. Antron McCray is now 46 years old. At the time of his arrest in connection to the Central Park jogger case, Antron was 15 years old. He said he was pushed to falsely confess by his father, who believed Antron might go free if he told police he was involved. Unfortunately, that led to Antron's falsely convicted, and he served 6 years in a youth correctional facility. Today, he leads a relatively quiet life in Georgia, where he lives with his wife and 6 children. But to this day, he has not forgiven his father for pushing him to lie to the police. He told CBS News that he looked up to his father, but he gave up on me. I was telling the truth, and he just told me to lie. He then said, why should I make peace with him? Raymond Santana Jr. is now 45 years old, and he was only 14 when he was arrested. After being convicted, he was sentenced to 5 to 10 years in a youth correctional facility. He served 6 years. In 2018, he started his own clothing company called Park Medicine NYC. His clothing line includes shirts, jackets, and hats. And the company also offered a t-shirt that lists the names of the Central Park 5. Interestingly enough, it was a tweet from Raymond that inspired director Ava DuVernay to start working on the movie When They See Us. Today, Raymond lives in Georgia with his teenage daughters. In June, he and his girlfriend, Flavor of Love star Delicious, tied the knot after being engaged 6 months prior to getting married. From April 27 to the 28th, 1989, all 5 teenagers were indicted on counts including the R word, assault, attempted murder, and rioting. Wise, being 16, was charged as an adult and was sent to Rikers Island, the prison in New York City. A 16-year-old boy in Rikers Island. Can you imagine what happened to him in that place? The remaining 4 teenagers were sent to a juvenile facility. Yusef Salam was just 14 years old when he got incarcerated back in 1990. He served nearly 7 years in an upstate juvenile detention facility. Yusef, who is running for a council member in New York City, had an interview with Gayle King. And this is what he had to say on her morning show.
We're going to begin this hour with an exonerated member of the so-called Central Park Five. We all remember this case, who's expected to join the New York City Council after his first run for office in 1989. Yusef Salam was 15 years old when he was wrongly convicted, along with 4 Black and Latino teenage boys, for the brutal rape of a jogger in New York City's Central Park. In 2002, their convictions were overturned by DNA evidence, and they became known as the Exonerated Five. Salam served nearly 7 years behind bars for a crime he did not commit, and now 2 decades after he was exonerated, Mr. Salam is declaring victory in his run for New York City Council while he waits for the primary race to be officially called. He's a criminal justice reform advocate and works with the Innocence Project. We're happy to say that right now Yusef Salam joins us at the table. Good morning to you, Yusef Salam.
My pleasure.
The official final count is today. We will know certainly by the end of the day, but it looks very good for you.
Oh, yes.
And you say, oh, yes, oh, yes. You said, what has happened in this campaign has restored your faith in knowing that you were born for this. And this is a line that got me. You said, every single thing that happens to you happens for you.
Yes.
What do you mean by that, considering what you have been through?
You know, it's the reality of being able to look back and say, man, that 2x4 that hit me allowed me to develop peripheral vision. Had it not happened, I wouldn't have been aware that the rug could be pulled out from underneath your feet, that a lot of us are waiting to live life. And God gave us permission to live life. And a lot of us are kind of playing this double dutch of when do I jump in, when do I jump in? The time to jump in is now. And so when things happen to you, the best thing that you can do is just say to yourself, this is for me. You know, this is developing me. This is altering me. Like right now, I get the opportunity to reflect light in the most darkest places around the world.
But had you always thought about getting into politics? When did this happen for you?
You know, early on, I read the story of Joseph in the Bible, in the Quran, and finding out that this individual was accused of a crime he didn't commit, the crime was rape, and that he went to prison, and he came out and became the greatest statesman in Egypt. I was inspired by that story because I was named after that prophet. And so, of course, for me, I was like, at 15 and 16, is it possible? But then it kind of was swept under the rug until 2002 when we were found innocent.
But there are still people sitting here today, Yusef, you know this, who don't believe that you should be out of prison, that, the words are, well, they certainly must have done something that night.
Right.
There's still people who believe that about you.
You know, you'll always get judged by the color of your skin and not the content of your character. And unfortunately, in the Black and brown community, when they look at us and they say to us, you're guilty until you're proven innocent. I mean, the law says innocent until proven guilty.
Yes.
But in our communities, you're seen as guilty, and the system is just going to play itself out, and you'll be able to get all the time that you're supposed to get. And in our case, it was like, we didn't do it.
Right.
And not only didn't we do it, because they got stuck with the lie, there was a young woman who could have been alive today. If the system said, you know what, something is wrong with this case. Let's take a step back and reevaluate everything. But they got stuck with us being the culprits, allowing for the real criminal to ultimately murder one of his last victims.
And speaking of the system and being wrongfully imprisoned, for most people, going through a dark time like that, they will come out on the other end and say, you know what, I'm through with the system. I'm through with the police officers. I'm through with the NYPD. That's not the approach you're taking. You talk about that 2x4 hitting you and allowing you to have that peripheral vision. What is your vision showing you and what you want to see in police officers nowadays?
I got to tell you, I've had so many profoundly impactful experiences with police officers and people who want him.
You're talking positive.
Positive, very, very positive. Righteous actors is what I call them. I met a young girl. She was 13 years old, and she stood up in an audience and said, "You know, Yusuf, I want to become a cop. What advice can you give me? I'm a cadet. I want to become a cop." And my first thought was to tell her to run. But then I realized that I wasn't talking to a cop. I was talking to a future guardian of society. And I got the opportunity to give her my best advice, telling her that on the side of police cars throughout the nation, you see the words "to serve and protect," that in New York City, they go a step above and beyond, adding the words courtesy, professionalism, and respect. And so for me, it's like, if this person who has found their purpose can understand that she is a guardian for society.
Right.
That's a different type. I want that type of person to guard me. I want that person to be out there saying, "You know what? I am to protect and serve all."
Right.
Yeah. It's important.
Mr. Salam, to an issue that New Yorkers are dealing with, but people in cities across the country are dealing with, that's gun violence. Here in this city, gun violence has declined somewhat. It's going in the right direction, at least the numbers are. However, the age of the shooter and the victim seems to be lower than ever. What do you make of that?
What I make of that is that we have been given such a devaluation of life that if I can't even see the humanity in you, I was raised as a child to see every single man as if he could be my father, my brother, or my son. And every single woman as if she could be my mother, my sister, or my daughter. Automatically, that level sets the type of respect that I'm supposed to give and therefore be given. And the fact of the matter is that when we look at what's going on in our communities, when you have poverty and abject poverty, if you will, you have this sense of hopelessness. The fact that people are seeing things like George Floyd get murdered or Breonna Taylor get murdered, you know, in their minds is this idea that tomorrow is not promised. And so therefore, I have to live as recklessly as possible. And in that recklessness, young people are exposed to everything. My children, I have children that are as young as 7 years old. They see everything. You can't shield them from the world. And in their response, they think that, oh, this is just, you know, to take another person's life is not, it doesn't
It's
mean
not a
as
big
much.
deal. Yeah,
It's not promised.
Yeah, they don't see that.
It alters everything. That ripples into the future of how we are as a people.
Yeah, which is why we have to continue to lead the way.
Absolutely. You know, my website that I lay out my whole platform really kind of tries to give people the perspective of what it's all about.
And what's the website?
HarlemForYusuf.com.
There it is right there. Yusuf Salam, thank you so much. We appreciate you for joining us.
Yusuf Salam has 10 children. The Washington Post published an editorial dated October the 16th where Salam said that the police officers deprived him and his co-defendants of food, drink, and sleep for more than 24 hours. In regards to him running for city council, this was the Post. Salam, a Democrat who will represent a central Harlem district on the city council, having run unopposed for the seat in one of many local elections held across New York State on Tuesday. He won his primary election by a landslide. So, folks, yes, he did win. And this post was on Google. In 2016, Salam received a Lifetime Achievement Award from President Barack Obama. He published a book, and it's called Better Not Bitter, Living on Purpose in Pursuit of Racial Justice. He's a strong advocate for prison reform. The book was published in 2021. Corey Wise was just 16 years old when jurors convicted him of SA, riot, and assault. He was sentenced to 5 to 15 years behind bars, and he was released after serving 12 years. Because of his age, he was questioned without his parents present. After the verdict was handed down, Corey Wise was heard yelling in the courtroom to the prosecutors, "You're going to pay for this. Jesus is going to get you. You made it all up." Corey Wise still lives in New York City and is often asked about his experiences Through his work with the Innocent Project, Wise also advocates for the rights of the wrongfully convicted as well as the criminal justice system reform. After their convictions were formally vacated, the 5 wrongfully convicted men filed a civil suit against the city, which they won back in 2014 for the reported amount of $41 million. YouTubers, if you'd like to weigh in on this case, drop it in the comments section. I'm over and out. I'll see you all in the next one. Don't forget to hit the like bell before you leave the page, subscribe to the channel, and also turn on your notification bells to be notified of the new videos that I'm dropping. I'm over and out. I'll see you all in the next one. Thank you for watching.